People like you don't belong in this neighborhood. I'll have you arrested right now." Those were the chilling words shouted by Karen Mitchell, the 52-year-old president of the Homeowners Association, as she pointed her finger at Jamal Washington on a rainy Saturday morning in Naperville, Illinois. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, comment your city or country so we know how far this story is reaching. If you believe justice must stand above intimidation, subscribe and hit like to help share this story. Now, let us return to that shocking morning. Jamal Washington, 38 years old, father-to-be, and a man who had built his life on courage and discipline, had only stepped outside to roll his trash can to the curb when he found himself facing three figures who looked official enough to fool a nervous neighbor, but fake enough to set off alarms in his trained FBI instincts. Karen stood in the middle, her expression full of spite, and on each side of her were two men in mismatched black vests with the words "Community Enforcement" stitched across them. To a stranger, they might look like law officers, but to Jamal, who had spent nearly 2 decades studying deception, the flaws were as clear as day. The badges didn't match. One vest hung loose as though borrowed from a thrift shop. The other carried an emblem barely glued on. Yet the danger was real, because one of the men, Brad Reynolds, a former soldier with scars etched deep into his face, clenched a pair of steel handcuffs in one hand and the shape of what looked like a weapon in his pocket. The other man, Derek Hayes, shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between Jamal and Karen as though his conscience was already at war with his orders. Jamal stood still, the trash can handle still in his palm, his mind racing but his face calm. He knew he had two choices: reveal his FBI identity immediately, which might cause panic, or play along just long enough to protect his pregnant wife inside the house and the neighbors who had begun to peek from behind curtains. Karen's voice rang again, dripping with arrogance. "We've received over 50 complaints about your so-called repairs in the garage, the loud gatherings at night, and the disrespect of community rules. Today, we will detain you until the board decides your punishment. To the average person, those words would sound absurd after all. An HOA has no power to arrest anyone. But to Jamal, they revealed something darker. This was not about rules. It was about racial bias and personal vengeance." He remembered the whispering tone when Karen had once said at a meeting, "People like you bring down property values," words that still stung. And now, she had gone a step further, recruiting 2 imposters to enforce her prejudice. The drizzle fell harder, streaking Jamal's gray t-shirt as his jaw tightened. Across the street, a teenager named Tyler Brooks, curious and bold, lifted his phone and began live streaming, his voice echoing on social media. "Y'all, look at this. They're trying to arrest Mr. Washington over trash cans." Within minutes, hundreds of viewers joined, the comment feed exploding with disbelief. Jamal glanced toward his house and saw the blinds shift. Aisha, his wife, was awake, her silhouette visible in the window. He gave the faintest shake of his head, silently begging her to stay inside, because the situation was too dangerous. Brad stepped forward, snapping the handcuffs open with a metallic click, his voice rough. "You've got 15 seconds to comply, or I'll use force." The threat was real, and Jamal noticed the outline of the gun more clearly now. He shifted his weight, ready if needed, his FBI training reminding him of every takedown drill, every hostage scenario, every reminder that speed and precision save lives. Derek muttered nervously, "Maybe we should wait." "Brad, this doesn't feel right." But Karen silenced him with a glare. "No, he thinks the rules don't apply to him. Today, he learns they do." Jamal's mind flashed back to his father's struggles on Chicago's South Side, how a man of dignity was once humiliated by false accusations. That memory fueled his calm, giving him strength to stand tall in the face of humiliation. "If you're real officers," Jamal said evenly, his voice carrying across the wet pavement, "then show me your identification, your badge, and the legal authority you claim to have. Karen's lips curled into a smirk. I don't need to show you anything. You'll obey, or you'll be removed. By now, more neighbors gathered, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, elderly and cautious, whispering about keeping order. A young mother held her baby closer, whispering in concern. Tyler's live stream crossed 1,000 viewers, then 2,000. The rain dripping down his phone screen as he narrated every second. Brad's temper flared. He shoved the handcuffs toward Jamal, barking, "Hands behind your back!" That was the breaking point. Jamal's muscles tensed, ready for what was coming, but he still held back, refusing to escalate until the very last second. What the imposters didn't know was that Jamal had already signaled his phone, sending a silent alert to FBI backup while appearing to casually adjust his pocket. But he also knew backup would take time. In the next moments, the entire neighborhood would see whether he could handle the threat on his own. Rain fell harder, thunder rolled faintly, and the scene became something no one could walk away from. Jamal's heart pounded, but his gaze stayed steady. Karen crossed her arms, smug, whispering to herself that she finally had him under control. But the truth was about to shatter her illusion, because Jamal Washington wasn't a man who broke rules. He was a man who upheld the law at the highest level, an FBI agent whose name was feared by criminals across the state, and in less than a minute, this quiet suburban street would witness a confrontation that would explode across social media, rack up millions of views, and destroy Karen's grip on power forever. Brad's voice cut through the rain like a blade, sharp and threatening. 15 seconds, then you're mine. The sound of the handcuffs snapping open echoed against the siding of the homes, drawing more neighbors onto porches and sidewalks. Jamal Washington did not flinch. His calm face only enraged Karen Mitchell further. She stepped closer, her umbrella dripping, her voice carrying over the growing murmur of the crowd. This man thinks he's above the rules. 50 complaints have been filed against him. 50! Garage repairs without approval, loud gatherings, parking violations, trash cans left out. Today he will pay. Those words, delivered with venom, spread instantly as Tyler Brooks kept live streaming, his teenage voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Guys, it's blowing up. 3,000 watching right now. This is crazy. The camera caught Jamal standing tall, his shoulders squared, his gray shirt soaked with rain, while Brad loomed with aggression and Derek shuffled nervously. For Jamal, every second was calculation. His FBI training reminded him that violence could erupt fast. The wrong move could risk his wife, his unborn child, and even the onlookers. He studied Brad carefully, the twitch in the man's left hand, the way his right hovered near his pocket, confirmed the presence of a weapon. Brad was not bluffing. Meanwhile, Derek's shaking hands betrayed his weakness, and Jamal recognized an opportunity. The man was already halfway to surrender if pushed the right way. Karen, however, was the engine of this dangerous theater. Her bitterness rooted not just in power, but in a history she carried like a scar, years ago. She had been dismissed by a black supervisor. She never forgave the humiliation. To her, Jamal was the embodiment of that memory, and today she intended to crush him. The drizzle turned into steady rain, drops streaking across Tyler's phone, blurring the image but not the intensity. Viewers poured into the live stream by the thousands, comments scrolling, some defending Karen, others demanding she stop, and many crying out that it looked like a setup inside the house. Aisha stood frozen at the window, one hand on her belly, her heart pounding as she watched her husband confront the storm. She wanted to run to him, to scream at the imposters, but Jamal's steady glance told her to stay put. He could not risk her safety. "Put your hands behind your back now," Brad barked, stepping forward, the metallic cuffs ready to bite. Jamal's voice cut through the chaos, deep and calm. If you're real law enforcement, you'll show identification. If you're not, then this is nothing but harassment. Karen's face twisted, her mask slipping. Don't play games with me. You don't belong here. You'll never belong here. The words were sharper than the rain, slicing into the fragile quiet of the neighborhood. Even the Andersons, who had always whispered about keeping order, looked shaken. The crowd stirred. Some gasped, others muttered, and Tyler's live stream surged past 5,000 viewers. Jamal inhaled, feeling the weight of every eye on him, every camera, every whisper. He thought of his father, humiliated years ago in Chicago, and how he had vowed never to let intimidation break him. That promise guided him now. He locked eyes with Brad and said firmly, "You don't want to do this." But Brad's mind was clouded. The man had once served bravely, but now, haunted by debts and trauma, he had allowed Karen's manipulation to fuel his rage. His voice shook as he shouted back, "Shut up! You think you're untouchable? You're nothing!" His hand drifted closer to the pocket where the gun was hidden, and the tension cracked through the street like lightning. Derek finally spoke, voice trembling. "Karen, maybe we should stop. This isn't right. We're not cops. We don't have the authority." But Karen's pride was stronger than reason. "Do it," she snapped. "Cuff him. Make him kneel if you have to. The board backs me. No one will stop us." Those words revealed her desperation, but also her blindness to the truth that her power was already crumbling. The neighbors shifted, uncomfortable. A young mother hugged her child tighter. An older man shook his head in disgust. Tyler's live stream rocketed past 10,000 viewers, the chat exploding with outrage. "This is illegal," one comment read. "Call the police now," another demanded. Yet Jamal remained motionless, his silence louder than their shouting. Every second, his plan crystallized. He needed Brad to expose the weapon. He needed Derek to break ranks. He needed Karen to reveal her malice publicly. Only then would the truth be undeniable. And as if on cue, Brad's temper boiled over. He shoved the handcuffs forward and growled, "Last chance." The steel glinted in the weak light, rain dripping off the chain. Jamal's eyes narrowed. He noted the trembling grip, the instability. He knew Brad was seconds away from revealing the gun. His body tensed, ready for the confrontation that might come. Inside, Aisha whispered a prayer, tears sliding down her face. She remembered all the nights Jamal had returned home with scars, both seen and unseen, from dangerous cases. She knew he could handle threats. But this was different. This was their home, their sanctuary, invaded by prejudice disguised as authority. Karen's smirk widened, convinced she had won, her voice carrying the triumph of a dictator. "This man is about to learn the price of defiance. This community will not be overrun." But what she did not realize was that every word, every sneer, every flash of hate was being recorded, broadcast, and judged by an audience growing by the second. Already, local hashtags were forming. Already, strangers were sharing the stream, calling for justice. Jamal's heart thudded, but his face remained still. His voice measured as he spoke again. "I will not resist an arrest that is lawful. But you, Brad, you know this is not lawful. And you, Derek, you know you're on the wrong side." His words hit Derek like a hammer. The younger man looked down, shame flooding his features. I can't do this," Derek whispered. He took a step back, lowering his hands, distancing himself from Karen's command. Karen's eyes blazed with fury. "Coward! You'll regret this." She turned her rage back on Jamal, spitting venom. "You're finished here. Finished!" The storm was reaching its peak, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of everyone present. Tyler's voice cracked as he narrated to his viewers. "Y'all, this is getting real. One of them looks like he's about to pull a gun." The live stream spiked past 20,000, then 30, a tidal wave of digital witnesses demanding accountability. Jamal braced himself, muscles coiled, mind razor sharp. He knew what was coming. Brad's hand shifted fully toward the weapon, his anger overriding reason. The next move would decide everything. Brad's hand hovered near the weapon, the tension so thick that even the rain seemed to pause. But before the breaking point could arrive, the community itself began to pour into the scene. Neighbors stepping out of garages, peeking from porches, walking into the street as if drawn by a magnet, their whispers rising into a chorus of uncertainty. Some siding with Karen out of fear of losing order, others shaking their heads at the absurdity of it all. And in the middle of this storm stood Jamal Washington, soaked by rain, calm in face but blazing inside, determined not to let panic dictate his next move. Tyler Brooks, the teenager with the phone, kept filming with trembling hands, announcing to his swelling online audience, now more than 50,000, that the whole neighborhood's outside. It's going down right now. His live stream chat exploding with words like illegal, racist, and call real cops. While comments flew from across the country as strangers shared the feed, Jamal's eyes darted briefly toward his wife's silhouette in the window, her hand still pressed against her belly, her face pale with fear, and he lifted his chin slightly, a silent gesture for her to stay put, reminding her with that one movement that protecting her and their unborn child was his highest duty. Karen Mitchell, however, seemed energized by the gathering crowd, her voice louder and sharper as she raised her hand and pointed at Jamal like a judge delivering a sentence, declaring, "You see this? Neighbors. This is what happens when someone refuses to respect the rules. He mocks your hard work. He lowers your property values. He disrespects our order. But today, we take our community back." Her words spilling out like poison. And for a moment, a few nodded uneasily, including Mr. Anderson, who muttered about wanting peace and order. But the tide was beginning to turn as more people noticed the trembling handcuffs, the fake vests, the aggression that looked less like law enforcement and more like bullying. Derek Hayes, the hesitant accomplice, rubbed his hands nervously, his voice breaking as he told Karen, "I didn't sign up for this. You said it would just be warnings. Not this, not guns." And Jamal seized the opportunity, his deep, steady voice carrying through the drizzle. "Derek, you know the truth. This is not law. This is manipulation. You don't have to follow her orders. You can step back right now. You can walk away clean." The words struck Derek hard, his eyes darting to the crowd, to Tyler's phone, to the comments flashing faster than he could process. And he stepped back another pace, guilt carved into his features. Karen snapped at him, her tone venomous. "Don't you dare betray me. You owe me. You wouldn't even be standing here if I hadn't paid your debts." And for the first time, the neighbors caught a glimpse of the corruption behind her authority. The gasps spreading as realization set in that their president had been manipulating broken men to do her dirty work. The live stream surged past 100,000 viewers. Hashtags exploding across platforms, people tagging news stations, demanding officials step in. But still the street was frozen in that tense standoff. Aisha gripped the window frame inside, whispering a prayer, wanting to run out, but knowing Jamal had signaled her to stay safe, her tears mixing with the rain streaking the glass. Jamal's mind was steady, weighing every option, reminding himself that backup was coming but not fast enough, that he had to control the storm until then. Karen's mask cracked further as she shouted again, "This man thinks because of who he is. He can walk all over us, but I will not be humiliated again." And those words revealed more than she intended, an echo of her past bitterness over losing a job to a black supervisor. Now spilling into the open like a confession of prejudice, the neighbors' faces shifted, sympathy draining away as they realized this was never about noise or trash cans. It was about bias, resentment, and abuse of power. Jamal spoke again, his tone carrying the weight of justice. "Neighbors, you can see the truth. You can see the uniforms are fake. You can see the threats are unlawful. You can see that this isn't about rules. It's about hate, and hate destroys communities. His words hit home, several in the crowd nodding firmly now, murmuring agreement. And Tyler's live stream captured every second, his young voice breaking in awe as he told the camera. He's standing up to them without even fighting back. This is unreal. We're at 200,000 watching. This is history right here. Brad gritted his teeth, the veins in his neck pulsing, fury overtaking reason as he shoved the handcuffs toward Jamal again, muttering through clenched teeth. "I'll shut you up one way or another." And Jamal saw the outline of the weapon shift clearer, his instincts sharpening like a blade, knowing the climax was close. Derek finally raised his voice, desperation spilling out. "Karen, stop this. You're going too far. This isn't leadership. This is madness." But Karen ignored him, her pride unshakable, her arms crossed as she barked. "Do it. Brad, show him the cost of defiance. Show them all who really runs this neighborhood." And that was the final straw for many in the crowd. Whispers rising into protests, someone shouting, "This isn't right. We need the police." Another yelling, "She's out of control." And the live stream comments flooded with "Call 911 and FBI, please intervene." Jamal's pulse steadied, his training centering him, every muscle ready for the inevitable lunge, his mind still calm as he thought of Aisha, of his unborn child, of his father's lessons, of the oath he swore to protect. And he knew that when the moment came, he would act with speed and precision. The storm of voices, rain, threats, and cameras blended into a single crescendo, the whole community now a stage, the nation watching in real time. And at the center stood Jamal Washington, unbroken, unbowed, waiting for the instant when words would no longer hold back violence, and action would reveal the truth to everyone. The breaking point came in a flash of steel and thunder. Brad Reynolds lunged forward, rainwater streaming from his scarred face, the open handcuffs clattering as he swung them toward Jamal Washington's wrists, shouting through clenched teeth, "You're done!" And in that instant, the quiet street of Naperville turned into a battlefield. Neighbors gasping, Tyler Brooks screaming into his phone, "He's going for him! He's going for him!" As the live stream rocketed past 500,000 viewers, the chat exploding with panic. But Jamal, trained for moments just like this, moved with precision, his body exploding into motion with the efficiency of years of FBI drills, pivoting to the side, grabbing Brad's wrist in a tight grip, twisting with just enough force to send the handcuffs flying into the wet grass. And in one fluid motion, he drove his shoulder into Brad's chest, sending the larger man stumbling back, arms flailing. And that was when the true danger was revealed. The outline in Brad's pocket flashing into reality as a black handgun slipped free and clattered to the pavement, its cold weight visible to every eye and every camera. The crowd erupted in horror, screams rising above the rain, a mother shielding her child, Mr. Anderson staggering back in shock, and Tyler shouting into his stream, "Oh my God, it's real! He had a gun! It's real!" The words traveling across the internet, igniting outrage and disbelief as hundreds of thousands turned into millions watching live. Jamal reacted instantly, his instincts honed by years of arrests, kicking the weapon away with a swift strike of his shoe, then forcing Brad to the ground with a controlled takedown, his knee pinning the man's arm as he twisted the other behind his back, his voice sharp, commanding, but calm, weapon secured, suspect restrained, the kind of words he had repeated in countless operations, but now spoken in front of his own neighbors, in front of his pregnant wife watching from the window, in front of the entire nation tuned into a teenage live stream. Brad groaned in pain, his anger spilling out. "She promised me this would fix everything. She said I'd be free if I did this." His words tumbling in broken fragments, the weight of debt, PTSD, and manipulation spilling into the open as he fought against the cuffs that now bound him instead of Jamal. Derek Hayes raised his hands, stepping back. Fear and shame etched across his face, his voice cracking. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this. And the neighbors saw the truth. That Karen Mitchell, their HOA president, had orchestrated it all, had turned desperation into a weapon against a man who only wanted peace in his own home. But Karen, instead of retreating, doubled down, her voice shrill, cutting through the storm. You don't belong here. You never belonged here. This neighborhood is not yours and it never will be. Words dripping with the bitterness of years. Words that revealed her heart more clearly than any evidence could. And the crowd recoiled, whispers turning into shouts, neighbors crying out in protest. That's enough. Karen, this is hate, not rules. You've gone too far. The tide finally breaking against her. Jamal stood, rain soaking through his shirt, his chest heaving from the struggle but his face composed, lifting the gun high by the barrel so everyone could see, then kicking it toward the curb, his voice steady, carrying authority that silenced even the thunder overhead. This was never about community rules. This was about intimidation. And today, it ends. And those words, captured perfectly on Tyler's camera, spread instantly across the internet, replayed again and again as proof of dignity under fire. Brad wept now, the anger drained, muttering about nightmares that never left him, about debts he could never pay. And Jamal, though firm in control, allowed a sliver of empathy, saying quietly, "You need help, not her lies," while cuffing the man with his own restraints, a symbolic reversal that no one missed. Karen's face crumpled as she realized her control was gone. The neighbors no longer her shield, the live stream no longer her tool of fear. Her cries drowned by the sound of unity rising from the crowd. The rain poured harder, streaking down Jamal's face as thunder rolled. And in that dramatic chaos, the live stream ticked past 3.5 million viewers. Comments flooding like a tidal wave. "Hero! Expose her! This is corruption in daylight!" The entire nation now aware of what one neighborhood had endured. Derek dropped to his knees, tears mixing with the rain, begging forgiveness, promising to tell the truth, confessing that Karen had hired them through a back-alley gig app, promising to cover debts if they carried out her orders. His words pouring into Tyler's phone for millions to witness. Neighbors who had once whispered against Jamal now stepped forward. Mrs. Anderson clutching her husband's arm, whispering, "We were wrong. We see it now," while others shook their heads at Karen in disgust. Karen, desperate and humiliated, shouted empty threats. "You'll regret this. All of you will regret this." But her words rang hollow, drowned by the steady chant of justice as voices rose. "Call the police! Arrest her now! We stand with Jamal!" The transformation complete as the community turned on its own leader. Jamal kept his focus, scanning the crowd, ensuring no further threat remained. His mind steady though his body trembled slightly from adrenaline. His thoughts flashing to Aisha in the window, to the promise he made to protect his family, and to the oath he swore to defend the law. And as he stood over Brad, weapon disarmed, truth revealed, community awakened, Jamal knew this was not just a confrontation in his driveway. It was the beginning of something larger, something that would shake the foundation of HOA abuse, something that would ripple across the country, because millions had just witnessed courage in the rain, dignity under fire, and the unmasking of hate in real time. The moment the weapon was kicked aside and Brad lay restrained in the rain, the crowd frozen in stunned silence, Jamal Washington finally did what he had resisted from the beginning. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his leather badge case, and flipped it open for every neighbor and every eye on Tyler's live stream to see. The golden letters glistening under the storm clouds, the eagle emblem shining as he declared with a voice that carried across the soaked street. "My name is Special Agent Jamal Washington, Federal Bureau of Investigation." And those words landed like thunder, shocking every witness into stillness. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tyler nearly dropping his phone as he screamed to his online viewers, He's FBI! Oh my God, he's FBI! And the live stream surged instantly past 4 million viewers. Comments exploding in waves of respect, justice, and she's finished. Karen Mitchell's face drained of color, her arrogance collapsing into stammering disbelief. No, no, you can't. You're lying. This is some trick. But the neighbors leaned closer, their eyes widening as they saw the badge gleam, their trust shifting in a single heartbeat from the HOA president they had feared to the man who had endured their doubts in silence. Jamal's voice remained firm but steady. This community deserves the truth, and the truth is that I have served my country. I have defended families across this state, and I will not stand by while hate and fear are used as weapons against innocent people. His words striking the crowd like a sermon of justice, and for the first time. The neighbors cheered, voices uniting in support, breaking Karen's final hold on them. Sirens pierced the distance, flashing red and blue cutting through the rain as real law enforcement arrived. Squad cars pulling up, doors slamming, and officers Lopez and Patel stepping into the chaos, their uniforms crisp, their presence authoritative but respectful. Lopez, a tall Latino officer with calm eyes, immediately recognized Jamal, his hand lifting in respect as he said, "Agent Washington, we've got this," while Patel, her voice steady yet warm, moved to secure the weapon and help cuff Brad properly, whispering to Jamal, "I'm sorry you had to endure this. We've heard complaints about her. But this is beyond anything we imagined. Her empathy genuine, her tone carrying the weight of shared experience with discrimination." Karen tried one last desperate act, attempting to run toward her house, but two neighbors stepped in her path, holding her steady until Lopez placed her in handcuffs, her voice shrieking, "You can't do this to me. I'm the president. I run this neighborhood." But the words sounded pathetic now, hollow in the face of overwhelming truth. And Patel announced clearly for everyone to hear, "Karen Mitchell, you are under arrest for conspiracy, harassment, and reckless endangerment." A declaration captured on Tyler's live stream, spreading instantly across the nation. Derek Hayes, still trembling, raised his hands high, pleading, "I'll cooperate. I'll tell everything. She made us do it. She hired us on some app, promised money, promised to fix debts." His confession spilling out for millions to hear. And Lopez nodded, pulling him aside, recording every word. Brad, broken and cuffed on the ground, muttered about nightmares, about promises Karen made, about the lies that dragged him into this, his voice cracking as he admitted, "I just wanted out of the pain. I didn't mean to go this far." And Jamal, though firm, spoke softly, "You need help, Brad, and you'll get it now. But accountability comes first." The compassion of a man who knew the scars of war but refused to excuse violence. Neighbors crowded closer, some apologizing through tears. Mrs. Anderson whispering, "We misjudged you, Jamal. We doubted you, and we were wrong." Her husband nodding with shame in his eyes. And Jamal, though exhausted, offered a simple reply. "What matters is that truth has been seen, not just here, but everywhere." Tyler's phone buzzed non-stop as notifications exploded. News outlets calling his name, his live stream trending #1 across platforms, anchors already replaying Jamal's words, his badge reveal, Karen's hateful outburst, Brad's gun on the ground, every moment dissected and broadcast as proof of corruption and courage. Aisha finally stepped outside, clutching her belly, her face wet with tears that mingled with rain, rushing into Jamal's arms as he pulled her close, whispering, "It's over. You're safe. We're safe." Her sobs muffled against his chest. And the crowd, moved by the sight, grew silent, giving the couple a moment of dignity in the midst of chaos. Patel placed a reassuring hand on Aisha's shoulder, saying, "You should be proud. Your husband just saved lives and exposed a sickness that runs deeper than this street." Words that struck everyone listening. reminding them that this was not just one neighborhood struggle, but a reflection of something larger. Karen, shoved into the back of the squad car, pounded her fists against the window, screaming empty threats about lawsuits and revenge. But no one listened anymore. Her reign broken, her mask shattered, her future sealed. Jamal stood tall, rain dripping from his brow, his hand gripping Aisha's firmly, his eyes meeting his neighbor's not with anger, but with calm resolve, as he declared for all to hear. Power without accountability destroys communities. But when people stand for truth, fear loses, hate loses, and justice wins. And the words were repeated by Tyler's stream, echoed in comment sections, quoted by reporters already arriving with cameras, destined to be etched in headlines across the country. The scene ended with Brad and Karen driven away in police cars. Derek escorted gently but firmly as he promised to testify. Neighbors dispersing slowly, many embracing each other, many lingering in silence, their lives forever changed by what they had witnessed. While Jamal and Aisha walked back toward their home, the badge still gleaming in his hand, a symbol not of status but of sacrifice, of the responsibility he carried even when facing threats in his own driveway, and though thunder still rolled in the distance. The storm inside the community had broken, the truth had been revealed, and the world was now watching, waiting to see what change would come from the courage of one man standing firm against intimidation. 2 weeks later, the quiet streets of Naperville no longer felt the same. For what had once been ruled by fear and whispered gossip now carried the weight of truth and the promise of change. And every neighbor seemed to walk with a little more awareness, a little more humility. Because the confrontation that began in Jamal Washington's driveway had not ended with the arrests. It had rippled outward like a storm wave, touching every corner of the community and beyond, landing on national headlines, sparking talk shows, and igniting debates about the unchecked power of homeowners associations across the country. Karen Mitchell, once the self-styled queen of the neighborhood, now sat behind bars in a county jail cell, facing 4 years in prison after being indicted for conspiracy, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. Her image replayed nightly on the news as the woman who tried to weaponize bias and intimidation, but instead became a symbol of disgrace. Brad Reynolds, the broken former soldier, was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm and attempted assault, though prosecutors acknowledged his PTSD and promised him treatment alongside accountability, while Derek Hayes, the hesitant accomplice, was offered leniency in exchange for full cooperation. His testimony laying bare the details of how Karen had manipulated them both with promises of money and freedom from debt in the neighborhood itself. Change came swiftly as the HOA board called an emergency vote, removing Karen permanently and appointing Elena Vargas, a young Latina professional who had lived quietly in the community for years, as the new interim president. Her very first promise delivered in front of dozens of neighbors gathered in the park. There will be transparency. There will be fairness. And there will never again be fear used as a tool of leadership. Words that drew applause and tears from those who had once been too afraid to speak out. Meanwhile, Jamal returned to his duties at the FBI. But life was anything but normal. For everywhere he went, people recognized him as the man in the viral video, the man who stood calm under pressure, the man who revealed his badge not to intimidate, but to protect. And though he never sought fame, it followed him anyway. News anchors dubbing him the agent in the rain, a phrase that stuck as millions replayed the footage of him disarming Brad and exposing Karen's corruption. Tyler Brooks, the teenager whose live stream had captured it all, found himself at the center of attention too, his video hitting over 3.5 million live views that day and tens of millions more in replays, earning him interviews on national platforms. But more importantly, giving him a voice he never thought he had. inspiring him to speak about justice, about accountability, about the courage to document truth. The neighborhood, once divided, began to heal through action. Cultural nights and community dinners replacing tense board meetings. Families once distant now breaking bread together, sharing food and stories in the same park where whispers of suspicion had once lingered. And Jamal, though reluctant to take any leadership role, was urged repeatedly by neighbors to consider running for the HOA board, some even suggesting he should chair it, though he often replied with a smile, "I serve in other ways, but I'll always stand with my neighbors when it matters." Yet even as hope bloomed, shadows remained, because Brad's associates from his darker past sent veiled threats, angry at his cooperation, and Jamal found his own safety once again a matter of vigilance. But this time the FBI and local police rallied around him, providing protection and standing as a reminder that no man, not even a decorated agent, is truly alone when justice is on his side. Meanwhile, a class action lawsuit began to take shape. Attorneys representing dozens of homeowners not just from Naperville, but from across Illinois, citing Karen's abuse as an example of a larger pattern of HOA discrimination, a legal fight that promised to set precedent and possibly bring federal oversight to organizations long considered untouchable. Karen herself, in a twist of irony, penned a letter from jail that was leaked to the press, a mixture of apology and bitterness, admitting that her loneliness and grief after her husband's death had twisted into obsession with power, but also lashing out at those she claimed betrayed her, her words sparking little sympathy, but serving as a cautionary tale about what happens when pain curdles into prejudice. Jamal read the letter only once before folding it away, telling Aisha quietly, "It doesn't excuse what she did, but maybe it explains why she couldn't let go of hate," his voice filled with both strength and sadness. In the evenings, Jamal and Aisha walked through the neighborhood hand in hand, neighbors waving, children calling his name. Tyler often trailing alongside asking questions about justice and law, his young mind hungry to learn from the man who had become a mentor without even trying. And everywhere Jamal looked, he saw signs of renewal. Gardens tended together, porches filled with conversation, and a sense of safety returning to the streets, a fragile but real unity born out of crisis. National media continued to follow the case, legal experts declaring that the viral video had changed the conversation about HOA accountability forever, lawmakers hinting at new legislation to protect homeowners from abuses of power, and commentators pointing out how a single driveway in Naperville had become the spark for a movement. Through it all, Jamal remained grounded, never boasting, never seeking attention, focusing instead on preparing for the birth of his child, reminding himself that his true mission was not in headlines, but in the quiet protection of family and community. And yet, as he tucked Aisha into bed one evening, feeling the baby kick beneath her hand, he knew the fight was not over, for prejudice does not die easily, intimidation does not vanish overnight, and there would always be new battles to face. But he also knew that courage, once shown, cannot be taken back, and the neighbors who once doubted him would now forever remember the man who stood in the rain, calm and unshaken, when false authority tried to break him. And so Part 6 closed not with finality, but with transformation. A community forever changed, a corrupt leader fallen, a wounded soldier seeking help, a teenager turned activist, and an FBI agent preparing not just for new cases, but for a new chapter as a father, carrying forward the lesson that even in the smallest corners of America, justice must always stand taller than fear. The weeks turned into months, and though the rain-soaked confrontation in Jamal Washington's driveway had faded from daily headlines, its echo lived on in every corner of Naperville, reshaping the way neighbors looked at one another, and the way ordinary people across the nation thought about power, bias, and responsibility by early November. The community was no longer fractured by fear, but bound by something new. A fragile unity built through shared meals, late-night conversations, and small acts of kindness that replaced the icy suspicion Karen Mitchell had fostered for years. And on one crisp autumn evening, families gathered in the community park for the first cultural festival in the neighborhood's history. Tables lined with dishes from every background: Latino tamales, Indian samosas, African-American barbecue, Italian pasta, proof that differences were no longer threats, but gifts to be shared. And Jamal, standing quietly at the edge of the gathering with his wife Aisha by his side, felt a deep peace he had not known since long before that rainy morning. Tyler Brooks, the teenager whose live stream had carried the story to millions, now strode across the park with a small microphone in hand, addressing the crowd with a mix of youthful nerves and emerging confidence. "We're here tonight because one man refused to back down, and because all of us learned that silence helps the wrong side. And I promise you I'll keep speaking up. Not just for me, but for everyone who doesn't think their voice matters." His words met with applause, proud smiles, and the kind of encouragement that tells a young man he has found his purpose. And Jamal, listening from the side, felt a surge of pride not for himself, but for the next generation that had been awakened by truth. Karen Mitchell's shadow still lingered, her sentencing scheduled for December, her name spoken now only as a cautionary tale. And though some still whispered sympathy for the pain she carried, none denied that her choices had hurt the very community she claimed to protect, a reminder that unchecked authority, fueled by bitterness, destroys more than it ever builds. Jamal, meanwhile, balanced his FBI duties with fatherhood, often slipping from high-level case briefings to neighborhood walks, holding Aisha's hand as they prepared for the birth of their child. His heart divided between the demands of justice on a national scale and the quiet duty of raising a family in a world still scarred by division. One afternoon, as he sat on his porch cleaning his service weapon, Tyler approached with a notebook in hand, asking questions about law, about justice, about courage. And Jamal realized that mentoring this young man was no longer optional. It was a calling. For Tyler represented every bystander who had once been silent but now chose to speak. Elena Vargas, now the permanent HOA president after a unanimous vote, often consulted Jamal informally, asking for his wisdom on leadership. And though he declined to run for office himself, he reminded her gently, "Power is never the goal. Service is." Words she repeated in every meeting, making them the motto of a new chapter for the community. National impact continued to ripple outward as lawsuits against abusive HOAs spread, some winning early victories, others climbing through appeals, but all of them fueled by the footage of that single driveway where fake authority met real courage. And in Washington, lawmakers debated new legislation requiring transparency and limits on HOA enforcement powers, citing Jamal's story as Exhibit A for reform. Yet Jamal himself cared less about the fame and more about the faces around him. Mrs. Anderson bringing over pies with a shaky apology for past judgments. Young families waving from porches, children running to greet him in the street as if he were not just a neighbor, but a guardian. In quiet moments, he reflected on his father's struggles, the humiliation that once drove him into silence, and he whispered to himself, "We are not silent anymore," a promise he carried as both son and father. Aisha, glowing with pregnancy, reminded him nightly that their child would be born into a stronger community because he chose restraint over rage, dignity over fear, and responsibility over pride. And her gentle words kept him steady even as threats from Brad's old associates occasionally resurfaced. Reminders that evil never fully disappears but must be faced again and again. The final gathering of the year was held just before Thanksgiving, neighbors circling around a fire pit in the park, each sharing one thing they had learned from the turmoil. And when it came to Jamal, he spoke simply, his voice strong yet humble. Power is not measured by how loudly you command, but by how wisely you protect. What happened here was never about me alone. It was about all of us deciding that intimidation has no home in our lives. And the crowd erupted in applause, not out of obligation but out of gratitude. Tyler, now more confident, added a closing thought of his own. When you see injustice, don't just look away, record it, call it out, stand up, because silence is the ally of fear. And though he was just a teenager, his words carried the weight of a man twice his age as the night drew to a close. Jamal looked around at the neighbors who once doubted him, now united, at his wife resting her hand on her belly, at Tyler with his phone lifted high not to film chaos, but to capture joy. And he felt the arc of his journey settle into place, from confrontation to revelation, from division to unity, from fear to courage. The story of one rainy Saturday had become a testament to resilience, and so the moral of the journey crystallized in his final thought. One that he shared aloud for all to hear, and for Tyler's stream to capture for the thousands still watching online. True power does not come from intimidation or control. It comes from responsibility, from the courage to do what is right even when it costs you everything. And if we choose truth over silence, justice will always win. And with those words, the crowd stood together, neighbors embracing, children laughing, the fire crackling in the cool air. And Jamal knew the community had not only survived, but been reborn, carrying forward a legacy that would outlast him, a legacy of unity, accountability, and hope. Thank you so much for staying with me through this powerful story. If it moved you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, and tap the like button so more people can hear it too.